So let me show you this woman. Her name is Betty Nesmith. Now, I actually tried to find one where she didn't have her hand on her cheek, but I couldn't find one, so I just had to go with this one. As you can tell by the picture, it was a long, long time ago this picture was taken. Some of you may recognize her name's trivia if you actually know what product she invented. It was something that was very, very popular with people my age and older. Today's generation probably doesn't even know about it, but it was a big deal when she invented it. She was a secretary in Dallas at this large company. Now, in those days, no computers. I know kids today can hardly believe it. No, we didn't have computers at one point in this history of our world. They would type things up on a typewriter. And the problem with typewriters, again, I'd have to explain this to all of my kids and all of my grandkids. It's like, typewriters, if you made a mistake, it just stayed on the paper. And you couldn't just hit the backspace or delete button. It didn't work. They didn't have it. And so you'd either have to just live with the mistake or rip it out and start all over again. And so Betty she had friends that were painters. And when they made a mistake on a canvas, you know what they did? They just put paint on it, covered it up, and went on and kept painting. And she thought, I wonder if there's a way to kind of like paint over the mistakes I make when I'm typing on my typewriter. And so some of you know then, based on this, what product she ended up messing around in her kitchen and started developing, and she came up with something that all of the country knew for a long, long time called whiteout. And it was this product where you just take this little brush out and you brush over the word and you let it dry, and then you could scroll back down and type right over it. And it was like it never happened. It was amazing, amazing. And so she started using it in her office building, and then pretty soon every secretary in the whole building was using this product. She actually called it Mistake Out when it was first invented. Mistake Out. Doesn't quite roll as well as whiteout. So she saw that everybody who was typing at the time loved this product, and so she wanted to market it. So she went everywhere trying to market her product. She even went to IBM, and they all turned her down, said nobody will want that product. Nobody will want whiteout. So she transformed her kitchen into a manufacturing plant, and she started to fill little white bottles with Mistake Out and sell Mistake Out from her kitchen. And before long, her kitchen would not keep up with the orders. Matter of fact, by the time she sold it for $50 million to Gillette, they had over $38 million a year in sales. $38 million a year in that little bottle. I love stories like that. I mean, if you know me inside, I just love stories like that, because what we're talking about, obviously, if I were to ask you, what are the qualities in a person that becomes successful in America? As a matter of fact, anywhere around the world. And I would say to you, give me a list. What are the qualities? Well, you could say all kinds of things, but eventually you are going to put this word on that list, right? You're going to put resilience. So here's what happens for poor Betty. She's got this great idea. She runs into an obstacle. Every single person says no. And what do resilient people do when they encounter an obstacle? They get over it, they go around it, they go under it, they tunnel through it, whatever they have to do, right? And that's what Betty did. If I have to start the manufacturing plant in my kitchen, that's what I'm going to do. That's what resilient people do. They don't take no for an answer. They get back up after they've hit an obstacle. So resilience is this idea of adapting and responding positively to stress and problems. By the way, by that definition, are you resilient? Did you have any problems this week? And did you adapt to those and respond to those stressful situations? And I love that word, positively. That's resilience, right? They get back up, they keep going. I love this. You get knocked down, you come back, and you come back at least as strong as before, if not stronger. A resilient person does. By that definition, are you resilient? Now, unfortunately, resilience isn't really what we're known for in America right now. COVID has revealed how not resilient we really are. I mean, things knock people down and they stay down. And that's what's happening all across the country. But I'm telling you, this is not, COVID didn't cause this. The lack of resilience was already visible in our country before COVID came along. Colleges have been talking about this for years, how not resilient this youngest generation is. And they talk about how college counseling offices are filled with 18-year-olds who come in because, somebody said something mean to them. And they just really, I don't know what to do. Or I got a B+ on my paper and I don't know what to do now. It's a B+, and it's just terrible. But this is true, and here's an actual story from college. 2 kids saw a mouse in their dorm room. Okay, so you know what they do? Naturally, they called 911 to come and deal with this horrific thing. And then afterwards went to the counselor's office on their college campus to deal with their personal trauma of seeing a mouse. This is the world we live in right now. This is the world we live in. People can't handle anything. Every little thing is a hurdle that knocks them to the ground and they can't get up now. Help, I've seen a mouse, I can't get up. All right, but the challenge of this, again, is, I'm sorry I have a lot of words on this next slide, but I really want you to think about this, not for how do we think about those college kids, I want you to think about this for you. It's the only way this is going to be relevant for you today is, how resilient are you? So think through these questions. Would you say, oh, I easily adapt to change? That's me. Call me Mr. or Mrs. Change. Stress makes me stronger. Would you say that? I bounce back easily after hardships. I stay focused under pressure. I'm not discouraged by failure. Is that you? Is that you? Failure doesn't even bother you. And you can easily handle feelings like sadness, fear, and anger. You just bounce right back. Are you resilient? We're in this series called Running on Empty, and as a nation, we are running on empty. And it's not that there's a problem out there somewhere. All of us know that there are areas of our life where we're not as resilient as we could be. And so that's why we're doing this. And I want to talk to you today about this. How do you keep going when you want to quit, or when you take a blow, or when you get knocked down? Because some of you just took a shot this week. Some of you, I hate to tell you this, but you know it's true. You know that there's a shot that's coming, right? That's life. You're going to take a blow. So we want to talk about this today. I want to ask you to open up your program, take out the notes that you'll find inside. Welcome to those of you who are watching online, of course. Thanks so much for tuning in. Those of you who are watching on our website at penuelchurchlife.com, you have these notes. You want to grab them? So important as we talk about this really important subject today. And I'm going to have to skip through some of it because I always have more than I can ever get through. So skip the whole first little section there and go right down to step number 1, because there's 3 steps, not 4, 3 that I want to emphasize today. Step number 1, when you take your next blow, the very first thing that you have to do if you want to develop resilience is this one. And this is going to sound strange, and I just want you to write it down. We'll explain it in a moment. But I want you to learn to choose to view all the painful things in your life as if they were discipline from God. Now, just hold that thought, because I know that can be confusing, but let me have you just write it down. We'll explain it, show you what it means. But I want to start by asking you, do you remember this girl? Her first name is Malala. I can't pronounce her last name. Yousafzai, something like that. She is from the nation of Pakistan. In 2012, the world heard about her because her dad they lived in an area where the Taliban was powerful in Pakistan. The Taliban didn't want girls to be educated past the age of 15. So they had literally, in the area where Malala lived, had blown up 100 girls' schools. Blown them up. But her dad was this very strong vocal leader about educating women. And so Malala grew up in a home like that, and when she was 12, she got to keep going to school, and the Taliban was mad about it. So she began to talk on social media about how much she loved being in school and how much great this was, and so the Taliban decided one day that she had to be taken out. So they sent a gunman to her school, and as she was sitting on the bus that day, the Taliban leader that they'd sent came on board and said, "Which one of you is Malala?" And when she was identified, he shot her in the head. The 12-year-old girl. Miraculously, she survived. She had to go through, just so much rehab and rehabilitation, and her story got out. That's how I heard about her, and some of you may remember this story in the back of your mind, because all of a sudden her issue became the world's issue. And even in Pakistan, there was this tremendous pushback against the Taliban for shooting a little girl because she wanted to go to school. Are you kidding me? And the world was so amazed because what she did next, she began to speak up for the rights of girls in her country again. Now, that's resilience. Shoot me in the head, and even then you can't stop me from talking. Isn't that amazing? A few years later, at the age of 14, she was given the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, incredible resilience. You can't stop her, no matter what you do. You can't stop her. Like I said, I just could eat these stories up. I love stories of resilience. Like, you can't knock this girl down. So the Bible would say, if you've ever read your Bible, you know that one of the consistent themes of God throughout this book is you've got to learn how to endure difficult things. You have to be able to go through these things and develop resilience. And I didn't know how until years and years ago. I was memorizing Hebrews chapter 12, this one chapter of the book of Hebrews, and I read words that have literally changed my life. I am telling you things today that changed everything about what I go through. Here's what I read all those years ago. When I got to verse 8, it said this: God says to us, I want you to endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. So what he says is, I want you to view every painful thing in your life as if God was disciplining you like a loving father disciplines his child. Now, it is really, really, really important that you know what he's saying. He's not saying endure hardship because it is discipline. He's not saying that. Because that would mean that, when you were abused by your next door neighbor, that was God disciplining you. That is not what the Bible says, okay? The Bible does not say that. The Bible does not say everything painful that's ever happened to you is God disciplining you like a loving dad. Are you kidding me? So, isn't it true so much of the pain we have in our life, we brought on ourselves? Isn't that true? I mean, for goodness sakes, when I was 11 years old, I was a little bit mischievous and filled up a whole bunch of water balloons one day. And my mom came out of the house. Perfect timing. Mom was going to get wet. So I started chasing my mom through the yard with the water balloons. This was so much fun. I was laughing like crazy. Mom is running away from me. Only time I ever remember my mom running. She's running away from me as fast as she can, yelling at me, don't you throw that, Brian. But when you're running this way and looking this way, bad things can happen. Like the tree that she didn't notice, that she ran full speed into and cut her head open. And you know how head wounds bleed, right? I'm an 11-year-old holding a water balloon. Yeah, a lot of the pain in our life, we bring on ourselves, right? It had nothing to do with God. God wasn't disciplining me. My father was disciplining me, and I deserved it because of what I was choosing to do, right? So it's really important that you don't misread that. A lot of the pain that we have in our life, we bring on ourselves. But he says, this is the concept of reframing. You ever heard that? It's a psychological term. It's like you need to look at the pain in your life a very specific way, and God tells us how. And here's why this is so important. Because what it does is it transforms my pain. The moment I learned this, it changed all the pain and suffering in my life, because it means all my suffering has a purpose in God's hands. Every single painful thing I've ever been through in my life, it transforms it. This is so critical, because what it meant is none of my pain in my life that I've suffered was pointless or wicked or evil people winning out or meaningless. None of it was that. All my pain has now been transformed when I remember to reframe it. So flip your notes over the back, and I want you to ask this question. I put down this, and for those of you who didn't open your notes watching online, I put down this, and I asked you to think about what are the 3 most painful things in your life right now, and you're welcome to put those down. But really what I want you to do is even go more focused on that. I want you to think about what's the most painful thing you've ever lived through. Some of you are living through it right now. What's the most painful thing you've ever lived through? And then I want you to reframe it. I want you to say to God, so do you have it in your mind? The most painful thing you've ever, maybe something you've lost. Maybe something someone said or did to you. Reframe it and say this to God. God, I'm going to choose to look at this as if it was discipline from you. Not that it was, remember, but you're reframing it. I'm going to choose to look at this horrible thing I lived through as if it was discipline from you. Now you're sitting here going, how does that help? You can't do step 2 without step 1. So once you do step 1, now you can do step 2. Step 2 is now you can ask the right question. You can't ask the right question without step 1. So the first thing is I look at the painful things in my life as if God was disciplining me, and now I have the power to ask the right question. In a few days, I will celebrate 30 years of being a pastor. That's unbelievable. 30 years of teaching and speaking in front of Christians. You can imagine when you do a job like this, as long as I have, that you are with people in some of the worst moments of their life, right? I've been with people when they have buried children, and I've been with people when they, at the moment, the police are being called because one of their kids took their own life. I've been with people when they discovered their child's been abused. I've been with people in some of the darkest moments of people's, existence. The very natural question we all ask when we're in overwhelming pain is why? Some of you are asking this about something painful in your life right now, or something painful in your past. You're asking the why question. Why did this happen to me? Why did God allow it to happen to me? Why did I get laid off? Why didn't they love me? Why did God let that neighbor move in next door when I was young? You're asking the why question. There's a huge problem with the why question. God has never, ever, in the pages of the Bible said, just ask the why question, I'll explain it to you. He's never said he will ever explain the why to you while you're here on earth, ever. And there's a reason why. God said this through the prophet Isaiah, just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. So think about the gap. Think about the moon. Think about the heavens and what a distance is so between the heavens and the earth. It's huge, right? He's saying that's the gap that exists between God himself and the way he thinks and us. So in other words, here's a little way, a small way to think about it. Why don't you try and take advanced college mathematics and teach it to an infant? Right? So go ahead, try and do that. You think how many of you think that's going to be great? I mean, how many of you understand anything on that board, right? No shot. I don't have a clue what any of that stuff is. So if you'd have to explain it to me, and I'm not even an infant, right? So trying to explain something that complex to a baby is never going to work, right? And he says that, well, the gap between God and the way he thinks and the plan that he's unfolding in this world and us is 1,000 times bigger than that. So the reality is he could try forever to explain why, and we would never, ever, ever get it. Because his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. And the truth is, as smart as we think we are, there are some things that we just won't ever understand. So if you pursue the why question, here's what I've seen in years and years and years of doing this. Why keeps you stuck? That's what why does to you. If you get hurt and you get stuck in the why question, or you start asking the why question, it keeps you stuck right where you're at. I have literally watched people not be able to recover from painful things in their lives for years and 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 years, because why keeps you stuck. It is never the question God wants you to ask. He can't always answer it. Sometimes he does. Sometimes you later learn why and you're like, oh boy, thanks God, you knew what you're doing there. But he doesn't always. So what's the right question? Once you understand this, It's like, all right, I'm going to choose to view everything painful as if it was discipline. Now you get to the right question, and here's the right question. Father, what do you want me to learn from this? That's the right question. What do you want me to learn from this? What do you want me to learn from this? Now, look at the verse again. Look at what it goes on to say. And so, again, when I was reading this years and years ago, it just blew my mind. He goes on to say this. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful, right? It's painful. If you had a good mom or dad who disciplined you appropriately, you know what I'm talking about, right? If you did something wrong, you chase your mom into a tree with a water balloon when you shouldn't be doing that, and you face some painful consequences for that, right? It's painful. I'm not talking about abuse. I'm talking about appropriate discipline when you've done something wrong. And he says this, no, it's not pleasant. It hurts. But then he says, but don't give up there, because look what happens next. Later on, that pain, handled right, produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been, and look at the key word here, trained by it. Trained by it. That's what he says. Every good parent knows this. Every good parent who loved their kids, when they saw their kids acting up or messing around or doing something wrong, set out to retrain their child. I mean, I knew this. I knew when I was growing up, if I threw a tantrum in the store when I got home, my backside would be sore. I just knew that. If I did this, this would be the consequence. I just knew it. I had been trained by it. So the result was, I didn't throw temper tantrums in stores because I didn't want the pain. The consequences were clear. I had been trained. Every good parent knows that. Every good parent does training when they see their child going down a path they don't want them to go down. But that's not your only option, right? You can, that woman that I started with, the maker of Whiteout, she could have hit that wall and fallen down and just stayed there. It's like, well, nobody will give me a shot, and nobody will buy my product, and she could have quit, and the world would never have known of her, and somebody else would have invented it. It's all about what do you do once you experience that pain and you get knocked down. Healthy people say, all right, I'm going to choose to view this painful circumstance as if it was God disciplining me. So that means, God, what do you want me to learn from this painful stuff I'm going through? Once you start asking that question, God begins to work inside of you in a totally different way to train you. So again, I have so many stories from my life. Once I learned these verses from Hebrews and I understood what God was saying, I've used this over and over again. So years and years and years ago, man, long time ago, it's interesting how naive I was about hiring Christians in churches. And I am not alone. Many Christians think, well, if you're hiring someone for a church, they're going to be a Christian, it's going to be beautiful and wonderful, and everyone's going to get along, and that's what it's like, as if unhealthy people can't work at churches. Oh, they work there too. They work there too. So years and years ago, hired this person and didn't know it at the time, only made it 8.5 months on the staff that I was at the time. He had lied on his resume, didn't know that. He'd lied to us in the interviews, didn't know that. He had lied everywhere. But that wasn't the worst part of his character. I started having issues with the guy immediately. Had to confront him again and again for behavior that was like, what are you doing? But the worst part of it was what he was doing that I didn't know about. I only found it out in an amazing way. I had a best friend. My best friend in the world at the time was on staff with me. Loved this guy. We'd been close for 10, 12 years by then. Well, 12 years by then. And all of a sudden, he and I started having tremendous conflict. I mean, one day he actually swore at me and hung up on me. I'd never experienced any conflict with this man my entire life, our 12 years of friendship. And all of a sudden, things were falling apart. And it was at the very end of this time, like this 8.5 month period, that my friend was literally standing at the door, about to walk out, him and his wife, and I was standing there just ready to let him leave, because I was so sick of the conflict. And I was never going to see him again, and I was never going to talk to him again, and they were standing at the door. And then, you ever have those moments of like, who cares? Like, total desperation. It's like, what have I got to lose? And so as he's standing there about to walk out, I said, well, I know why this is happening. I know what you think about me. I know what you're telling people. I know that you're telling people this about me. And I told him what I'd been told. And he said, I've never said that about you. And he said, I know what you're telling people about me. And he said, yeah, I know you're telling people this about me. And I'm like, I've never told anyone that. I don't even think that. And I said, but I know this other staff member has told me that you've been telling everybody this. And he said, well, that guy has been telling me that you've been saying this about me. So it was this amazing, jaw-dropping moment. We're like, what? Are you kidding me? So then I started asking other staff members. So what would happen is this guy would walk out of a meeting. He'd walk into that person's staff, their office, and he'd say, you know what? I heard Brian just saying this about you. Can you believe that? And they'd be so hurt and so angry. And then he'd walk into my office and say, you know what? I was just having a conversation with them. You know what they just said about you? They just said this about you. And I'd be like, oh, well, who do they think they are? How could they say that about me? And he intentionally did this with every single member of the staff. My best friend was literally about to walk out of my life, and I had no clue what was happening. Needless to say, once we found all this out, he was done, cleaned up all of that mess. But because he was a really good liar, 14 families left the church, massive fallout. Because people believed him. And they wouldn't believe all of us saying, here's what happened. It didn't matter. And I was in tremendous pain, but I knew this. I knew this. So I did the things I've already taught you. I said, God, I'm going to view this as if it was discipline from your hand. Ow, this is painful. And then I asked the question, what do you want me to learn from this? And it didn't take long. The moment you start, now here's the thing, the moment you start asking that question, it's not like God just, the heavens part and he goes, wham, here you go. He will reveal it to you. He will reveal what he wants you to know once you start asking the question. And he slowly started revealing. One of the things, it's kind of a dud to say it out loud, okay? He started revealing, Brian, you don't know enough about hiring to keep hiring people. So you don't know enough. You need to change the way you were hiring. So I began a mission to learn everything I could about hiring. I read every book I could. I attended every conference I could. And I slowly started rebuilding it. There were 2 people in the interview process that caught that this guy was lying. And I never knew it. But they immediately didn't trust him. So when I found this out afterwards, I put both of them on the new hiring team. And I actually gave one of them power to overrule me. I literally said, you outrank me when it comes to hiring. So if you tell me no, and I'm like, yeah, you win. Because I'm not going to do this again. Then it'll be your fault. That's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, I don't trust me. I've already demonstrated I can't do this. And this huge change happened in a positive way because of pain. Resilient people ask the right question. So, on the back of your notes, again, I put this down. And notice what I put down. For those of you who are watching online, you didn't download the notes. I put this thing. So again, what are the 3 most painful things? And look at what I put after it. Father, what do you want me to learn from this? And I want you to actually say those words to God. Now, I'm telling you, the first time you do this, if you're really in pain, you say it with a clenched jaw. You're like, Father, what do you want me to learn from this? Because it hurts. It hurts. Matter of fact, the first 20 or 30 times you may say it through a clenched jaw. Until it starts to come around and settle in your heart that he can do something with this. Which brings me to the third and maybe the most important of them all. You don't end that prayer without doing this. You claim God's promise to bring good from what you're going through. You claim God's promise to bring good from what you're living through right now. You know as well as I do, there are seasons of life where it's like anything that can go wrong will go wrong, right? You've all had them. I had a season of life years ago, I'm not making this up, it wasn't even a year. In less than a year, my water softener broke, my microwave broke. Both of the vehicles I owned had multiple breakdowns. One of them cost me $1,200 to repair, and 6 months after I fixed it, it broke again. I had one child whose wisdom teeth came in, $4,000 to pull them all. And then another one came in. I had 2 kids in college. My third was headed there in a year. I had a wedding to pay for. And then my sewer line broke. And it broke under my driveway. Do you know what happens when your sewer line breaks under your driveway? Jackhammer. And they jackhammer it all up and dig it out. It cost me $5,200 to repair my sewer line and repair my driveway. In less than a year, all of those things happened. Now, at some point, all you can do is laugh, right? It's like, all right, what's next? What's next? My left arm going to fall out? I don't know. Something's going to happen. Because you have those seasons of life, and obviously your resilience is really tested in those seasons. Some of you are in one of those seasons right now where it's like, I don't want to answer the phone. I don't want to read my email. I don't know what's coming next. And so in the middle of that, God says, here's the basis for hope. And you need hope. I mean, our world needs hope, doesn't it? Don't these young college students need hope? That things can get better than what we're in the middle of right now. And God provides that. Look at the hope that's in this verse. He says later on, it's not instant, so sorry about that, but later on it's going to bring this positive change in your life, this harvest of righteousness and peace. I love that word peace. How many Americans are living with peace right now in the middle of COVID and job uncertainty and the conflict in our society? He says that if you do this right, peace is one of the outcomes. Because here's what God has promised. We know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love him. It doesn't say everything's good, but he says, I'll bring good out of this. So here's what it means on your notes. I want you to write this down. God never wastes a painful experience, even the ones we bring on ourselves. He never wastes one. So on the back of your notes again, I want you to circle this, because after you go through those first 2 steps, here's the prayer you pray, and it's a prayer of faith, right? Because you haven't seen it yet. You say to God, Father, I look forward to seeing how you will bring good from this painful experience. And again, the first time you say those words, if you're really in pain, they just hurt. They just hurt. I've been practicing these steps for a long, long time. And when something awful happens in my life, the first time I do these first 3 steps, it's not easy to get through step 2, and it's really not easy to get through step 3. Had a really cool experience, though, happen this last week. One of my daughters lives in a big city. She and her fiance have friends that have been a part of their life for years, good friends. And so about 10 months ago, these 4 friends decided to move in together, rent a house in this very expensive city. And by pooling their income, they could afford a nice house. And so they moved into this really nice house together, and things were going great. And then not long after, they actually moved in right at the beginning of COVID. And so all of a sudden, these young people, all of them, young 20s, are dealing with this horrific thing happening around them. And you know what happens? How much have you read or heard about the mental health problems in America right now? It's huge. And so these youngsters really started struggling. And even though they've been friends for years, something happened not even a week ago that was like the final straw. And so my daughter called me and said, how do I deal with this? And so I said, well, just have this conversation. Here's what you want to say. And if you've listened to the last couple of weeks of messages, you know what I was counseling her on. And so I said, well, here's what you say. And the conversation went nowhere. Nowhere. It went so bad that my daughter's 2 friends, these other 2 friends, moved out on Wednesday. They tried to solve it on Monday. It went so bad, they moved out on Wednesday. And so now my daughter and her fiance live in this house they can't afford to live in. The lease is up in 2 months. Thankfully, her friends are at least going to have the integrity to pay the next 2 months of rent so that they have 2 months to find a place to go in an expensive city. And so, talk about pain. All of you know what it's like to lose somebody that you consider important to you. And so they're dealing with this grief. Now they got to find a new place to go, and there are complicating factors. They have a cat, and they have a snake. And a lot of people will not allow you to have those items in where you're going to go. Plus, they've lived in a house And they were in apartment life for a long, long time. They didn't want to go back to it, so they wanted a house. And on top of that, they both work in different directions in the city. So that means you're really going to be challenged to find something that's going to work for everybody. And so there were all these lists, and it got so complicated and so stressful. And so my daughter had been searching and searching and searching, couldn't find anything. So she said she laid down on her bed, and she was listening to one of my sermons. And she was... I happened to be talking about this, the power of God and how his power is supernatural. It's not natural power. You've got natural power. He offers you supernatural power to do what you can't do. And she was so struck by this, and so she was laying there, and she's been struggling with her faith for a while, she'd say. And she said, I grew up listening to Dad tell these stories of faith and the power of God, and I thought that type of thing would never happen for me. And so she said, as I was laying there, though, all of a sudden a verse popped into my mind. This is the key. If you give God a shot, he will speak to you. That's why I say so much. You have to find a way to read your Bible, even if it's a little bit each day. And the verse that popped in her mind was this. Jesus said this, look at the birds. They don't plant or harvest or store food in barns. You go outside, look at the birds on the tree. They have barns? No. They don't have bank accounts. But Jesus said, your heavenly Father feeds them, and aren't you more valuable to God than the birds are? And she said, it hit me right there. If my God will give birds a place to live and eat and be happy, then why wouldn't he provide for me? So I turned to him that day, and she said, I was honest. I didn't know how to pray anymore. It felt weird and awkward, and I laughed at myself, but I believed what I said nonetheless. I said, look, God, I'm not very good at this. I don't know how to trust you, but I want to try. I am not there yet. But what I do know is that you will provide for us. I've done all I can do. You know where I'm supposed to be, so please show me where to go. I'm kind of dense, so please make it obvious. But I know you have a place in mind for me and for my fiance, so I'm giving this worry to you. Lead the way. I love the authenticity of that prayer. If you haven't learned it yet, the only types of prayers that get through are authentic. That's it. Say all the fake little prayers you want. You don't mean what you're saying. They matter nothing to him. But he said, if you just have the smallest speck of faith and you're honest and you bring that honesty to him, boy, you experience him. So a little while later, she got back on her computer and she started looking, and there just happened to be this button. You know how this happens, right? There just happened to be this button, and it was about apartments, and they weren't really thinking apartment living because the city is so expensive, and they didn't want to go back, and how could it be nice? But she decided to click the button, and she said her screen lit up with a Christmas tree with all these lights of places, and she started clicking and looking at them, and it was incredible. All the things they could afford that had everything they were asking for, that would allow them to have a snake and a cat, and that would be right where they needed to be, and it was within this very short time. She said, I now have two already. With 2 months to go, I already have 2 places that we're going to be starting to tour just to look at. She said, I looked at the screen and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I said, I could live there? I can afford that? She said this, I know I can't do this on my own, but I know that God will show me where he wants me to be, and it has brought me so much peace. And what does the New Testament say? If you make this shift, he will bring a harvest of righteousness and peace into your life. This is our God. So here's what I want you to think about. Pick one painful thing from your life. Maybe it's current, maybe it's past. I know people, you do too. You know people who are stuck in the past. They are holding on to bitterness and pain from their past, and they've held on to it for years and years. In some cases, they're still angry at somebody who's dead. And they're still bitter about things that they'll never be able to clean up because the person isn't even alive anymore. So you think about what's painful to you that meets this criteria, and you follow these steps. These steps 1 through 3, you say to God today, and you can use the form on the back. Put that down and say, Father, I'm going to look at this as if it's discipline from you. So what do you want me to learn from this right now? And then just pray that prayer of faith and say, Father, I look forward to seeing how you will bring good out of this painful experience. Give God the opportunity to start doing what he wants to do inside of you. You will experience God. Now, if you're just exploring your faith with us here or watching online, we don't have a God like some world religions do. We don't have a God who sits off in the corner of the universe, far away from us all, distantly watching us in our painful world and thinking, well, that's too bad for all of them. We have a God who 2,000 years ago came into the world and became one of us. Everything you've suffered through, he suffered through. You know what it's like to be betrayed by a friend? Well, guess what? One of his inner circle betrayed him, sold him over to his enemies. You know what it's like to be abused? He knows what it's like to be physically abused, beaten, tortured. You know what it's like to have people say awful things about you that aren't true? So does he. Our God knows exactly the pain that we've all lived through. Incredibly, he came on this rescue mission for all of us. Let me have you bow your heads as we finish. This great God of love and mercy came into this world 2,000 years ago because you and I have hurt other people. It's not just that there are evil people out there. There's evil within the heart of all of us. We have all been unloving in our lives. And those unloving things have to be paid for. And he came to pay for all of them. And that's why he came. And that's why he died. And with his death on the cross, he took into his body all that we've done that's wrong. He died and then rose again. And anyone who will let him, he will forgive. And he will come live inside of you and begin a change process from the inside out. If you want this God in your life, all you have to do is reach out to him in faith. Just like my daughter's prayer. You don't have to have it all figured out. You can say something authentic to him like this. Say, Jesus, I don't have it all figured out. I still have questions. But with the smallest amount of faith, I'm turning to you today. I've been unloving. I admit it. Please forgive me. Come make your home inside of me today. I want a new life with you. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as we finish up, can I ask you all to grab your little connection card out of your program? Even if you're a regular attender, I know I ask you to do this each week, but just take a moment. Some of you want us to pray about something. There's a place where you can put down your prayer requests. Maybe you are dealing with something that's so painful, you want prayer. We have a team of people that will pray for you. Just write it down. Or maybe you renewed your commitment or asked him to forgive you. Just check the box and drop it in let us know what you've done and drop it in one of the offering boxes. If you're watching online, you can do the same thing. There's a little box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen that says that you've made a decision. Check the box and let us know, and we'll send you some follow-up stuff in the mail. Thanks so much for coming, and I hope to see you again next week.